Thank you for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun. So let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Rival parties are struggling to narrow their differences over next year's budget bill, with the most contentious area being the creation of public sector jobs. Up to 800 million workers worldwide could lose their jobs to robot automation by 2030, but more could be created to offset the loss, according to McKinsey Global Institute. These stories and more coming right up. Grueling negotiations are underway at the National Assembly with the aim of reaching an agreement over the government's 2018 budget proposal in hopes of putting it up for a full floor vote. Now, the clock is ticking after Saturday's midnight deadline came and went without the rival parties reaching a compromise. Let's now turn to our National Assembly correspondent Kim Min-ji on the phone for the latest details. Min-ji, fill us in.
Ji-eun, senior lawmakers from the three main political parties resumed negotiations this morning in hopes of reaching a compromise over the government's $394 billion budget bill for next year. Now, it was their first face-to-face encounter after missing the deadline on Saturday, unable to narrow their differences. They are under strain with just weeks left before the end of the year. If a proposal isn't passed by the new year, the government will have to draw up a provisional budget that can only be used for mandatory expenditures. Now, rival parties are still quite some distance apart on key issues, but reportedly have started to draw up a draft proposal, raising hopes that an agreement will be reached sometime soon.
So like we know, rival parties have been locked in crunch talks running up to Saturday's deadline and even on Sunday. So walk us through the major areas of contention.
Well, the most contentious area has been the creation of public sector jobs, the Moon Jae-in administration's #1 campaign pledge. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea wants to add some 12,000 new government jobs next year. It says it's willing to cut the number to 10,500, but the opposition is demanding that the figure be slashed further. Rival parties have also yet to narrow their differences over the $2.7 billion to be set aside for small firms to cushion the fallout from next year's hefty minimum wage hike. They're clashing over how long the support would be provided, with the opposition stressing that the budget cannot be used to bankroll higher wages. The main opposition Liberty Korea party is firm on its stance that it will not accept what it calls a populist budget that will damage the country's fiscal health. The center-left People's Party, which holds 40 seats and seems to be holding the deciding vote, has been more or less aligned with the conservatives on the disputed areas. Now, it's an opposition-led parliament with the ruling party short of a majority with just 121 seats. So winning the opposition support is seen as crucial to get the government's agenda rolling. And so I will be keeping a lookout to see if any compromise is reached today.
All right, thank you, Min-ji, for that. Now, it's been 6 months since the Employment Situation Board was installed at the presidential office as part of President Moon's campaign pledge of improving the job situation in the country. According to Chungwade, the job situation has been under constant monitoring for the past 6 months, and this is just an interim check of the latest updates. The Employment Situation Board consists of 2 large panels that show 18 key indicators, including the employment rate, the overall number of jobs, and the wage gap between regular and irregular workers. Are robots about to take over our jobs? A recent research revealed that robots are set to replace hundreds of millions of human workers in the near future. But the good news is that other advancements in the economy are likely to offset the losses by creating more jobs than those being replaced by automation. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
By the year 2030, up to 1/5 of the global workforce are likely to lose their jobs as a result of robot automation. That would be up to 800 million people. This new research released by the McKinsey Global Institute adds a fresh perspective on what is becoming an increasingly concerning picture of the future employment landscape. The effects of automation will affect countries regardless of their developmental stage, with China in particular expected to see roughly 100 million workers being replaced by robots. In Korea, roughly a quarter of the workforce will be required to find new jobs. This is slightly lower than the figure in Japan, but higher than that of Germany and the US. McKinsey says physical work involving repetitive tasks like welding and soldering on an assembly line are the most replaceable type of jobs at 78%, along with data processing tasks carried out by mortgage brokers or back office staff. On the other hand, jobs requiring human interaction such as doctors, lawyers, and teachers, and posts that handle unpredictable physical work like gardening, construction, and care work will be less affected by automation. While there's talk of much concern, McKinsey says the good still outweighs the bad. It says up to 890 million new jobs will be created globally over the next 13 years from changes in the economic structure, rising incomes, and new technology. The consulting firm also adds that the government will need to start enacting plans to retrain their citizens for the future ahead and learn how to do new things over time. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Korea's trade ministry held discussions on the Korea-US FTA on this Monday, rounding out the domestic review on how to move forward with the trade deal. Trade Minister Kim Hyun-jong sat down with officials from 20 ministries and related organizations to sketch out a plan that would be submitted to Parliament before fresh negotiations are opened with Washington. The government-level meeting follows a second round of public hearings held on Friday, during which opinions were gathered from researchers and industry specialists on the impact of the five-year-old deal. Local farmers have fiercely opposed any additional market opening moves, arguing they've already suffered enough. Meanwhile, the Seoul government is poised to begin free trade negotiations with Mercosur. The trading bloc, which is South America's largest, consists of 70% of the region's population and 76% of its GDP. And now, moving on to our coverage of the markets, we have our markets contributor Kathleen Oh joining us on the line. Hello, Kathleen.
Hello, Jiyoon.
All right, so tell us how the local markets performed on the first trading day of the week.
Korean markets overall were trading mixed throughout the day. On the equity side, Kospi Index traded higher on foreign investors and institutions turning to net buyers, while individuals were net selling. At the closing bell, the Kospi rose 1.06% to close at 2501.67, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq retreated 0.67% to finish at 782.45. We think investors' sentiment around Korea's macro fundamentals are improving and have encouraged foreign inflow. The final Q3 GDP growth marked 3.8% year-on-year last Friday, revised upward from the already higher than expected 3.6% preliminary data. Also, higher oil prices forecast led to recovery in petrochemical stocks, and talks of easing tension with China also led higher prices for cosmetic names. Foreigners bought around $170 million and institutions around $60 million worth of net shares. On the foreign exchange market, the Korean won fell on a broad dollar rebound today. The local currency opened at 1085.73 and traded above 1088 through most of the afternoon, closing at 1088.85. Korean won and most of the emerging Asia currencies lost value on the back of a rebound in the greenback after the U.S. Senate Republicans approved plans to reduce corporate taxes, and optimism over the tax plan diminished political uncertainty. The dollar index picked up to 93.173 during the Asia session.
Now, with the week ahead, can you give us the latest rundown on major market events to look forward to?
We have an eventful week ahead. Market focus will be on progress over the U.S. tax reform. Prospects on tax reform seem more optimistic as the Senate Budget Committee voted to advance the new tax measures last week. In terms of data, November non-farm payrolls coming out this Friday will be on focus. We expect NFPs to stay robust at 198,000 versus 261,000 in October. In Europe, the UK and EU will discuss Brexit this week. British Prime Minister May will meet with presidents of the European Council and European Committee ahead of an EU summit next week. If there is any progress on exit negotiations, we will likely see discussions on the rights of EU workers and the UK's future trade relationship with the EU.
In terms of central bank meetings, tomorrow we see the Reserve Bank of Australia keeping its cash rate at 1.5% and maintaining a sanguine growth and inflation outlook. On Wednesday, we expect Brazil to lower its policy rate by another 50 basis points to 7% on easing inflation and weak growth. We also expect the Reserve Bank of India to keep the repo rate on hold at 6% given an upside inflation surprise in October. Policy rates in Poland and Canada are also likely to be unchanged.
All right, shifting our focus back to Asia, where should we keep our eyes on here in Korea and the Asia front?
In Korea, we have a relatively quiet week on the data front. We have November foreign reserve and October balance of payment data tomorrow. They are not likely to be market movers. In wider Asia, we have Australia's Q3 GDP this Wednesday, which likely rebounded to 3%. Taiwan's export growth in November likely rebounded to 9.2%, while China exports more likely grew 7%. We also expect headline inflation to stay elevated in Philippines and modest in Taiwan. This was Kathleen Oh for Business Daily.
It's this year's largest corporate acquisition. American drugstore chain CVS is buying U.S. health insurance company Aetna. CVS announced on Sunday that the deal had been reached at a whopping $69 billion US. Shareholders of the insurer will claim some 22% of the combined entity, with the rest being owned by CVS shareholders. The pharmacy retailer says the merger will widen the spectrum of medical services available for clients and bring in new customers. CVS plans to provide basic medical services and assistance to Aetna's over 20 million clients through its clinics. Toshiba could be nearing a deal with business partner Western Digital that clears the way for the $18 billion sale of its prized memory chip unit. Various reports point to a compromise being negotiated with the U.S. hard disk drive maker. Bloomberg reports that it includes an extension of their joint venture agreements. Meanwhile, Japanese wire service Jiji Press says Western Digital will lift its complaint filed with the International Court of Arbitration for a stake in Toshiba Memory. In September, Toshiba agreed to sell its semiconductor unit to a consortium led by Bain Capital, which includes SK Hynix, to offset massive losses incurred in its U.S. nuclear business. The Moon Jae-in administration has revealed its plan to boost Korea's economic cooperation with Southeast Asia. With many Korean firms having been hit hard by China's THAAD retaliations, they have been looking further south to find new business opportunities. Our Ian Shin reports.
Countries in Southeast Asia are rapidly becoming major trade partners of South Korea. Within just a year, the growth rate of South Korea's exports to members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has jumped by nearly 30%. The 10-member ASEAN region is seen as a place of ever-growing economic potential, with the region's GDP consistently rising since 2010, and the upswing is set to continue for the coming years.
The rising economy leads to market expansion, so ASEAN makes the ideal trade partner for Korea. But with economic growth, the region's demand will also become more sophisticated. Producing high-quality goods and a feasible market strategy are a must for Korean companies.
Researchers agree that Korea's economic interests have been focused too much on China and the U.S. for years now. All the more reason why long-term solid business plans for Southeast Asia are needed, as many countries in the region are considered a relatively new market for Korean firms.
As of now, Korea's trade with ASEAN is rather limited, highly concentrated in Vietnam and Indonesia. In order to expand the horizon, we will need thorough market research of each country, as well as different long-term business plans made specifically for each region.
The diversification of global markets is not only an opportunity, but a much-needed strategy for Korea. Since July last year, the loss sustained by local firms from China's economic retaliation over the deployment of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD is estimated to be billions of U.S. dollars. Experts say it was a wake-up call for Korea, and with that, businesses across various sectors need to make sure to avoid the risks of overdependency on limited number of markets.
China is expected to keep nurturing the growth of its own companies. And as long as North Korea's provocations linger as a root source that complicates the relations between Seoul and Beijing, it's best that South Korea lessens its economic reliance on China.
이은신, Business Daily, Ho Chi Minh City.
Multiple travel agencies in China have confirmed that tour sales to Korea have resumed after being halted in March. China News Service reported on Sunday that a pair of Chinese travel agencies have begun offering group tour sales, with the earliest ones departing as soon as December 19th. Beijing Youth Daily noted that a group of 32 visitors left Beijing on Saturday to tour Korea on a group visa. The group notably went to Shilla duty-free shop instead of Lotte duty-free, which remains the target of Beijing's retaliatory measures. The tour reportedly began sales on November 28th, but was limited to offline sales only. Sales are expected to restart in other provinces soon, besides Beijing and Shandong, where the ban was first lifted. Electric vehicles provide a green alternative to gasoline-powered cars, but they often take a long time to charge. However, in a possible game changer for the industry, automakers are set to introduce new hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which take about, get this, 3 minutes to power up. Our Park Se-young has the story.
Electric cars are environmentally friendly, but the problem of charging times remains unsolved. After an hour of charging, electric vehicles can usually run for just 30 to 40 kilometers. This is why hydrogen vehicles are being seen as an alternative.
Hydrogen is a light substance with small molecular weight, so it can store a whole lot of energy when compressed. This boosts the mileage.
Next year, Hyundai Motor will release a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle that can run for 580 kilometers after 3 minutes of charging. Hydrogen vehicles have the advantage over electric cars when it comes to ease of charging, but electric cars come out on top on other aspects. Although they take longer to charge, electric car batteries are more efficient than hydrogen fuel cells. And electric vehicles simply run on batteries, whereas hydrogen vehicles require expensive equipment to turn hydrogen into electricity.
Electric cars have an advantage in small and medium-sized cars, whereas it's much better to choose hydrogen cars for bigger cars and commercial cars.
Automakers are revving up their efforts to become global leaders in the green car market. However, both electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles need to solve the problem of the lack of charging stations. The Korean government plans to increase the number of fast-charging EV stations to 100,000 by 2022. And hydrogen fueling stations to 1,000 by 2025. Park Se-young, Business Daily.
Toys and action figures are no longer just a market for kids, but also adults who are emerging as big spenders in the industry. With a growing number of products branded with popular animated characters, the so-called kidult market is growing rapidly. Here's our Elliot Kim with more.
This adult collector has iconic monster collectibles sold in Japan during the 60s and 70s. Mr. Joe, now 41, has been building his collection for the past 10 years, spending about $27,500 in total.
The toys not only bring about childhood nostalgia, but they play a big role in relieving stress from the real world.
For many adults, these toys serve as an escape from their everyday pressures, and these consumers are creating a new market and revenue source for stores. The domestic market for kidults is expected to exceed $900 million this year as retailers continue to look for ways to capture the segment. Characters that used to only appear on kids' items like toys are now being added to products commonly used by adults. Companies are getting creative, making items like a hammer that compacts into the shape of an animal and movie character figurines made of crystal.
Recently, the designs of character products are being taken from children's items and incorporated into products that serve a more practical purpose.
As the end of the year approaches, retailers are planning to expand selections available to buyers both on and offline, with kidults expected to drive strong sales. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Several high-profile accidents and disasters have occurred here in Korea this year, spiking the public's interest in safety-related products. And to meet such demand, more functional and easy-to-use products have been hitting the market, allowing people to stay better prepared in case of emergencies. Our Cho Sung-min has more.
A growing number of people are spending money on things to keep them safe because of some big and small accidents that happened this year. The best sellers are ones that use the latest technology. For instance, there's a mobile application that notifies user in real time of accidents in Gyeonggi-do province and provides up-to-date details on things local residents should be aware of. Based on the user's location data, the program automatically sends an alert when accidents or disasters happen nearby, whether that's a landslide or a burning building, and it provides the safest evacuation route from the site.
I feel safer using the app because it lets me know when an accident has just occurred near me.
Sales of a newly developed fire extinguisher are also rising fast. More than 27,000 units have been sold in just the first 7 months of release. It has a speaker that gives audible instructions for people who aren't sure how to use it.
소화기 사용법 1. 안전핀을 뽑으세요. 2. 노즐을 잡고 불 쪽을 향하세요. 3. 손잡이를 움켜쥐고 분말을 쏘세요.
There's also a new product for use at home. This plastic box serves as a clock, hopefully in most occasions, but when a quick reaction is necessary, it's also an emergency kit for treating injuries. The contents range from simple bandages to survival supplies such as glow sticks and blankets. These days, many people feel there's a heightened risk to public safety, and so even more creative and functional safety products are expected to hit stores going forward. Cho Sung-min, Business Daily.
We're now witnessing an emerging trend of retailers looking beyond simply selling products to providing cultural experiences that evoke emotion. Here's our Eunice Kim with some examples.
As the artwork splits, it opens to a space replicating the painting. It's as if you're walking directly into the cityscape. One can even converse with the murals on display.
언제쯤 받아볼 수 있나요, 편지?
최대한 빠른 시일 내에 배달할 수 있도록 노력하겠습니다.
The exhibit merges technology with 19th century Impressionist masterpieces, producing an unexpected multi-dimensional experience. It's the brainchild of a domestic alcoholic beverage company.
It's melding technology with the works of 19th century French painters. It's the first theme park of its kind. There's space for expansion, and we're also looking at exports.
A photo exhibition at a major department store features athletes of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Positioned all over the property, it captures a moment of dynamic jumping, or another lying peacefully against a white canvas backdrop, harkening a contrast to a fast-speed luge.
A department store can be more than about shopping. It can be about enjoying culture by taking in an art exhibition.
One by one, companies in Korea are extending from simple product selling into experiences that evoke an emotional and memorable response in what's being called emotional marketing. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.